After 12 years of being trapped inside this dungeon, he defeated the boss once again, but instead of escaping, he was sent back to level 1. The MC stared at the familiar floor and suddenly burst out laughing. It wasn't happiness, it was frustration, because this wasn't his first time clearing the tower. It was his 1349th.
What?
But how did humanity end up in a world filled with dungeons and monsters? Years ago, monsters suddenly appeared across the world, pushing humanity to the brink of extinction. Then, a mysterious dungeon tower appeared. Its arrival awakened supernatural abilities in ordinary people, creating the first hunters. As more dungeons and gates appeared, hunters formed guilds to fight the monsters and protect humanity. And among all these dungeons, the dungeon tower was the most notorious, because our MC had been trapped inside it for nearly 12 years. Every time he reached the top and defeated the boss, he was sent straight back to level 1, and now, he was starting his 1350th attempt. But this time, something was different. He immediately opened his status window. Nothing had changed. After 12 years inside the tower, his stats had already reached a level where ordinary growth was practically impossible. He was already far too powerful. Then suddenly, the endless loop has been removed. The MC froze. After 12 years, he could finally go home. Without wasting another second, he jumped. Boom. His body shot through the tower, tearing through dozens of floors in an instant. For him, these monsters weren't enemies anymore. They were obstacles. He cleared floor after floor without breaking a sweat. It was less like watching a hunter clear a dungeon and more like watching a prisoner finally escape from a 12-year sentence. Within an hour, he had reached the final floor. He defeated the boss for the 1350th time, and this time, there was no reset, no level 1, no endless loop. He simply turned around and walked out of the dungeon tower. After 12 years, he was finally free. But the moment he stepped outside, something unexpected happened. Everyone's eyes turned toward him. The crowd fell silent, because during his 12 years inside the tower, countless hunters had encountered him. He had helped them clear dangerous floors, saved them from monsters, and effortlessly conquered levels that ordinary hunters could barely survive. And he had done all of it, wearing nothing but a pair of slippers. His strength had become legendary, his aura was terrifying, and his ability to clear floors alone had become something hunters talked about for years. That's why the moment he walked out of the tower, everyone already knew who he was, the ultimate advanced hunter. Just then, a man approached him. It must have been tough surviving inside that dungeon for so long. The man had no idea who he was talking to. He simply asked for his name. For Kim, though, none of that mattered. After 12 years, he was finally free, so with a huge smile he answered, "Hyonu Kim." The man's expression suddenly changed. He quickly checked his records, then his eyes stopped on an old list. First-generation hunters, and there it was, Hyonu Kim. His face went pale. That record was from 12 years ago. There was no way this could be the same person. Impossible. A week later, the hunter evaluation finally arrived. It was the day everyone had been waiting for. Hundreds of newly awakened hunters gathered for their first official evaluation. But among them was Kim, who had attracted the attention of 3 mysterious individuals. They weren't there to evaluate the other hunters. They were there for Kim. They wanted to see whether the legend was actually true. Meanwhile, Kim couldn't care less. While everyone else prepared their equipment, he was sitting there eating chips. Burp. One hunter couldn't help but ask, "Why aren't you wearing any equipment?" Hyonu looked down at himself. Slippers, no armor, no weapons, nothing. He didn't even look interested in the exam. Before anyone could question him further, the doors suddenly opened. Behind them was a massive tutorial labyrinth. An instructor stepped forward and explained the rules. The participants simply had to make their way through the maze and reach the exit. They have to use any abilities or skills to survive. The moment the test began, everyone rushed inside. Everyone except Kim. He casually walked up to the instructor. "So, it doesn't matter how I reach the exit, right?" The instructor stared at him. He was an A-rank hunter, and in all his years, he'd never seen someone this uninterested in an evaluation. Kim was standing there in slippers, yawning. "Yes," the instructor replied. "You can reach the exit however you want." Kim nodded. "Good." The instructor couldn't hold back anymore. "Is this exam a joke to you?" Kim raised his hand, stopping him. "Save the lecture for someone who actually cares." Then he glanced at the labyrinth. "I've got better things to do." The instructor's expression darkened. What an arrogant brat. Kim suddenly smiled. "Want to make a bet?" The instructor frowned. "If I clear it in 20 seconds, you give me $900. The instructor thought Kim was bluffing. "Fine, but I'll bet $9,000 that you can't do it." Kim immediately accepted. "Deal." He walked toward the labyrinth. Everyone watched him carefully. Then he placed his hand against one of the walls. The crowd looked confused. What was he doing? Kim pulled his fist back and punched. Boom, the entire wall exploded. The labyrinth was no longer a maze. There was now a straight path directly to the other side. Kim casually walked through the hole. Easy $9,000. The entire room went silent. Nobody could believe what they had just witnessed. Even the three mysterious observers were completely stunned. They had come here to determine whether the legend of the first-generation hunter was real. While everyone's attention was still focused on Kang Hyun-lee, one thing was certain. Everyone believed he was the strongest hunter there. But ever since Kim had appeared, Lee's spotlight was disappearing. The first exam was immediately cancelled. The examiners realized it wasn't enough to properly determine everyone's ranks, so they decided to conduct another test. Meanwhile, in the waiting room, Kim was completely relaxed. He was practically sleeping while everyone else talked about him. Then the next test began, and the first hunter to enter was Kang Hyun-lee. He stepped into the testing zone. The moment the timer started, he moved. In just 2 minutes, Lee had killed around 74 monsters. The entire room erupted. Everyone was convinced Lee really was the strongest. Then the next number was called, number 34, Kim. Everyone immediately started talking. They believed the first test had simply been a fluke. There was no way Kim could compete with Lee, but Kim didn't seem to care. He walked into the testing zone looking half asleep. The moment the doors closed, monsters surrounded him from every direction. The exam began, and then everyone watching the screen froze. Because they couldn't see Kim, not because he had disappeared. He was simply too fast. The only thing appearing on the screen were monsters suddenly collapsing, heads separated from bodies, one after another. The mysterious observers stared at the screen in disbelief. Even they couldn't follow his movements. His attacks weren't complicated. There was no flashy technique, no special ability, just overwhelming speed. 2 minutes later, the timer stopped, and the final result appeared on the screen. 250 kills. The entire room went silent. Kim had destroyed more than 3 times as many monsters as Lee. Once again, he had stolen the spotlight. Lee's face twisted in frustration. He pulled out his phone and crushed it in his hand. Meanwhile, Kim was sitting in a private room. A woman sat across from him. She had come with an offer, $9 million. Kim's expression immediately changed. What? She explained that she wanted him to join the Ares Guild, but Kim didn't even hesitate. I'm not interested in joining any guild. The woman stared at him. You're joking, right? Kim simply shook his head. She tried convincing him again, but Kim had already made up his mind. Think about it later, she said. Little did she know, Kim wasn't interested in becoming a member of any guild, because after spending 12 years trapped inside the dungeon tower, he had other plans. Kim simply walked out of the room. He had no interest in the guild's offer. Later that night, he lay on his bed, thinking about the woman who had offered him $9 million to him. It had all been a waste of time. He grabbed the list of people who wanted to meet him. As he scanned through the names, a few of them looked strangely familiar. He had seen those names before. After thinking for a moment, Kim decided to meet them, and when he arrived, he immediately recognized the 3 people waiting for him. They were the same mysterious individuals who had been watching him during the evaluation. But Kim knew them from somewhere else, 12 years ago, back when they were still children. One of them was the girl he'd encountered inside the dungeon tower. Kim remembered her clearly. She had once been so terrified by a monster that she had literally peed herself. The girl's face turned red. Say one more word about that. She glared at him, and you're dead. Kim didn't seem bothered. Instead, he calmly picked up a piece of sushi and took a bite. For the first time in 12 years, he was eating food he'd actually missed. But then the 3 of them revealed something that immediately caught Kim's attention. They knew about him. Not just the rumors, everything. Kim's expression changed. What? Then he realized something. If they knew about all his runs, they knew exactly what he had done inside that tower, even the embarrassing ones, because there had been times when he had cleared entire floors without wearing a single piece of clothing, and these 3 people had apparently seen it all. But that wasn't the most frightening part. They didn't just know what Kim had done, they knew how strong he had become, so the 3 of them immediately warned Kim about the Ares Guild. They explained that the guild wouldn't simply let him walk away after rejecting their offer. Ares controlled nearly 66% of Korea's dungeons, making it the most powerful guild in the country. If Kim refused to cooperate, they would eventually try to eliminate him, so they told him to be careful, but Kim didn't seem worried. Later that night, Kim returned home and happily collapsed onto his bed. For the first time in 12 years, he could finally relax. Then knock, knock, someone was at his door. Kim opened it and found the apartment security guard standing outside. Mr. Kim, there's someone waiting for you in the lobby. Kim immediately shook his head. Tell them I'm not home. The guard hesitated. I would, but they're from the Ares Guild. If I refuse to cooperate, I could lose my job. Kim had no choice. He followed the guard downstairs, and waiting for him was none other than the head of the Ares Guild himself. The man didn't waste any time. You really think you can keep growing by entering dungeons alone? Kim looked completely uninterested, then he gave him a simple answer. I don't give a shit about your guild. The room went silent. One of the guards standing beside the guild leader suddenly slammed his fist into the table. Crack, watch your mouth. The guild leader raised his hand. Don't bother. He pointed toward the guard. This man is an A-rank hunter. He can crush you. Kim glanced at him, then smiled. An A-rank. He looked almost disappointed. He's garbage, just like the rest of your guild. The guard's face twisted with anger. Kim slowly removed one of his slippers. He held it in his hand, then pointed it toward the hunter. I can beat you with this. The A-rank hunter couldn't take it anymore. He charged. His fist came straight toward Kim's face, but before anyone could react, Kim swung the slipper. The impact sent the A-rank hunter flying across the room. Boom, his body crashed straight through the wall. Half of him was left inside the room, while the other half was hanging through the other side. Everyone froze. Kim casually looked at the guild leader. What were you saying again? The guild leader's face went pale. Kim then looked down at his slipper. It had broken from the impact. He sighed. Damn, I liked these. Then he casually threw the broken slipper at the guild leader. Boom, the head of the Ares Guild finally realized something. They hadn't come here to recruit a powerful hunter. They had just picked a fight with a monster. Later that day, the same man approached Kim again. This time he had information about a dungeon that was perfect for newly awakened hunters. There was just one problem. The dungeon was controlled by the Ares Guild. Kim immediately frowned. Why does that name keep coming up? The man sighed. You don't understand how powerful Ares has become. Ares controlled nearly 66% of Korea's dungeons, but their influence wasn't the biggest problem. It was what happened inside those dungeons. The man lowered his voice. Hunters can kill each other inside Ares-controlled dungeons and get away with it. Kim looked at him. If a hunter kills another hunter, the incident can simply be blamed on a monster. The investigation would conclude that the victim was killed by a powerful creature, and the real killer, he could simply walk out, no charges, no punishment, nothing. And recently these incidents had been happening more and more often around Ares-controlled dungeons. Kim's expression darkened. So basically, they can kill whoever they want. That's why you need to be careful. Kim stood up. I should get going. The man immediately became nervous. Wait, don't tell me you're going to that dungeon. Kim shrugged. Maybe. Kim, that will only make your relationship with Ares worse. Kim stopped for a moment, then smiled. I think I've already made things pretty hostile. After all, he had just beaten one of their A-rank hunters with a slipper. Meanwhile, inside the Ares headquarters, Kim was already the subject of a completely different conversation. The guild had obtained the results from his hunter evaluation, and the data was impossible to believe. His physical strength was absurd. His combat ability was off the charts, but what shocked them most was what wasn't being used. No magic, no special abilities, almost no stamina, not even luck. One of the executives stared at the results. Is the machine broken? Another shook his head. I don't think so. Then he's easily S-rank. He paused, possibly even higher. The guild leader immediately asked, did we try recruiting him? Yes. And the executive hesitated. The people we sent are currently in the hospital. Silence. The guild leader leaned back. Then forget recruitment. But he'd be extremely valuable to us. I know. Then his expression changed. But he's also a threat to my position in this guild. Finally, the guild leader gave his order. Just terminate him. They believed killing Kim would be easy. They had no idea. Kim hadn't even been using 10% of his strength. To him, Ares wasn't some terrifying organization. They were just another obstacle.